I'm grabbing those magazines the wrong way.
Today we're taking a look at the fairly new Bear Creek Arsenal Bufferless 9mm setup. While you're here, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all of that is free and does help us out quite a bit. On top of that, go ahead and comment why you love or hate 9mm PCCs in the comments down below. Now, full disclosure on this upper receiver and kit really was sent out to me by a subscriber of mine personally on my personal channel. I had absolutely no affiliation with Bear Creek Arsenal for this review. They do not work with me personally any longer. So this review, again, has nothing to do with them. However, I didn't pay for the upper receiver. I received it from a viewer. Some of the damage that you'll see on the upper receiver was from the original customer, not from me. Now, we'll get into the whole setup and how I currently have it running in just a minute. So with the Bear Creek Arsenal Bufferless system, we have the entire recoil system contained within the upper receiver and this little adapter in the back. Now, this one here was bought as just the upper receiver and adapter. I believe the cost on these is about $350, and that's the complete upper receiver, recoil system, and adapter. It doesn't come with any sort of brace or anything else like that, just a rear Picatinny shelf so that you can attach your favorite 1913 brace or stock on the back if you so desire. This one here is the 4.5-inch version with a 4-inch MLOK rail out front. Very standard Bear Creek Arsenal type stuff. This one here is also, of course, the right side charger with their Gen 2 side charger, which is very good. Now, because it is literally bolted to the bolt itself, it is, of course, reciprocating, so you will watch it go back and forth. Now, currently, the way I had this set up is I went out and I bought one of the Aero Precision EP9 lowers. So this is a Aero Precision lower with, of course, Glock magazines. Now, I did have a few issues with magazines, not with the upper receiver. We'll get into reliability in just a minute, but this one here was fed with Glock mags. Now, a few of the Glock mags, the extended stick mags that I had, did have some issues, but that's because those are bad magazines.
Uh-oh. Yeah, some of the bigger stick mags. Let me lock the bolt back. Bolt is locked to the rear. Yeah, it doesn't want to catch.
Now again, because the entire recoil assembly is contained in the upper receiver and their adapter block, that means you can, of course, use your side folding braces or stocks or what have you, and of course, the gun will still run perfectly because, again, it doesn't utilize the buffer tube or anything like that, meaning that with the 4.5-inch version, you get a complete package that is very baggable, it is very hideable, it is very compact, so you can carry this in a lot of places where if you had a standard buffer tube at the end, this now doesn't fit in a lot of backpacks and you got to get a specialized pack or whatnot. So again, with this folding setup that doesn't utilize a buffer tube, not only does it still retain full function even in the folded position, but it's very concealable, very portable, which is a attractive set of features to a lot of people. Now, at the end of the day, this is still a 9mm AR-9 at heart, so it has a 4.5-inch barrel. So in terms of like ballistic performance, it's not going to be anything special. That's going to be the love-hate relationship of 9mm PCCs. Is it still a 9mm PCC? You're not going to get 300 blackout or short-barreled 5.56 performance out of a 9mm cartridge. Now, of course, the advantage of something like this, Glock mags are fairly ubiquitous. We all have a lot of them. You can get extended mags, you can get drum mags, so on and so forth. Now, before we get into performance, reliability, accuracy, you guys probably want to get at least a somewhat better idea of how it all works. Getting it together and apart can be a little bit awkward as it is different. You can't hinge it on like a standard AR-9 or AR-15 upper receiver. Now, in the back, what we have here is exactly as I said earlier. It is basically a chopped down 9mm BCG where they quite literally take about 2 inches off the backside. And that allows you to, one, have a lot more space inside of the upper receiver itself for the recoil to happen. So you only need a little bit of extra room on there to be able to get the full cycle of the bolt. Now, one very interesting thing about this bolt is it doesn't really look like they've added all that much weight. Normally with a 9mm blowback system, which is exactly what this is just a blowback 9mm AR-9, you have a very, very heavy bolt to slow down the opening process because, of course, the only thing holding that cartridge in the chamber is the weight of the bolt itself. So again, as soon as you pull the trigger and that recoil starts to happen, it happens very quickly. So to not get an out of battery detonation, you know, where the side of the case blows out, usually you have a very heavy bolt. Really, the only additional weight on the BCG itself, of course, to try and make up for everything that's cut off, is the area where the recoil and guide rod actually fits into, which is bolted onto the top of the BCG. So as far as weight goes, I would speculate that it's at least 1 to 2 ounces lighter, if not a little bit lighter even, than other 9mm bolts. Now, as a result of that, it didn't have any sort of reliability issues with the ammunition that I was using, which was 115 grain, some Sterling imported Turkish ammunition, and some 124 grain ball as well. I didn't experience any issues with any of that ammo, though again, your mileage will definitely vary depending on what ammunition, magazine, so on and so forth. Now, as I mentioned, it's a little bit awkward to get off and on. Fortunately, you don't really need to do it once you get it all set up. So looking at the back end here, this little adapter piece here in the back comes with the kit, and it actually goes on very well. Now, this is a solid block of aluminum. It's a very simple machining job. It's not particularly elegant or refined, though again, Bear Creek Arsenal is looking at a very price-focused customer base, so I really don't think they needed to go anything special on it whatsoever. Basically, you have a very small tube that will screw into the back of your lower receiver. Then you have this big aluminum plate that slides over top, a single screw that screws down on top, and then it's locked into position. Very simple to install. If you do have a standard AR-15 lower receiver and you're using a mag block and not an Arrow EP9 or something like that, you are going to need to take off your own buffer tube, unstick the castle nut, so on and so forth, get all of that off, and then install this. Fortunately, the installation process was very, very simple because, again, you just screw one little piece in that fits into where the buffer tube would normally go on an AR-15 lower receiver, slide on the adapter block, screw it in place, and then you're good to go. Now, getting these guys back together can definitely be the more awkward part because you kind of need to angle it around a little bit, make sure that you get it all the way in there, and then try and get it around. There we go. See, it can be a little bit awkward. It's not terribly difficult, and once you've done it a couple times, you can kind of get the hang of it. But now we get a full bolt travel, and we can, of course, on this Arrow-9 EP9 lower, lock the bolt back. It doesn't have a last round bolt hold open, but you can lock the bolt back if you so desire, and that means that we have full travel of the BCG, or the bolt in this case, which means that we assembled it correct. Another very quick thing I want to mention about how this recoil system works is, as you notice, there is a single, very small spring and no buffers or anything else like that to kind of slow down the bolt. So the action is very light. It does not take a lot of force to get it to full lock back. Certainly less force than like a full-on carbine spring, and of course, carbine spring with buffer to help kind of slow it down a little bit. So in this case, you get a incredibly fast action. If you were to put this on a full auto lower, I'm sure the rate of fire would be absolutely insane if you could actually do it without horrendous bolt bounce that you're going to get off of something like this. And again, there is no buffer to try and reduce bolt bounce on something like that. There's only that very small spring. It's not really anemic because, as we'll get to performance and reliability, it was 100% reliable. It is just a little bit weaker than what I'm used to on something like an AR-9. Now, getting into performance, how it was to actually shoot this thing. The recoil feels great. If you'll notice it in the shooting footage, it basically does not move whatsoever. That action is so fast that while, yes, it is snappy, basically all that happens is the gun comes up and then the bolt slams right back home and brings it right back down onto target, meaning that what you get when you're looking at it when you're shooting quickly is you get a motion that looks almost like a little jittery, but it's really not moving all that much. So while, yes, it is snappy, the entire recoil cycle is happening so fast that there's basically no movement on target, meaning that inside of 10, 15, 20, 25 yards, depending on your personal skills and target size, you can basically pull the trigger as fast as you want to without much felt recoil. Well, I should say there's a good amount of felt recoil, but at the end of the day, there's not that much actual recoil because your sights are not moving all that much in between shots. They rise up a little bit, that bolt slams home, and then it goes right back down onto target. Now, as far as reliability was, again, the only issues that I had were with some of my extended magazines, not Glock factory extended magazines, some KCI and SGM mags that really haven't worked well in any gun that I've used them in, even like a stock Glock. That's not a stock Glock, but other stock Glocks, they haven't really performed all that well in. So yeah, some of the extended mags, I did have some feeding issues. One of them wouldn't lock into the lower, but that is a lower receiver issue with the Arrow EP9, not an issue with the upper receiver. So as far as reliability goes on factory Glock magazines, reliability was 100%. So again, in terms of reliability, the system might seem a little bit weird in how it works and a little bit different from what I'm used to on other AR-9s, but reliability was 100%, so I don't have anything to complain about that whatsoever. On top of that, when we talk about accuracy, I didn't do any like accuracy testing. I was just using some pretty cheap imported brass case ball ammo. Now, one thing I will say about the accuracy on one of these barrels, so the barrel is 4.5 inches, 1 in 10 twist, 4150. I believe it's just a phosphate finish is what it looks like. Now, if this were in a pistol, this would be a bull barrel, a very, very heavy barrel, as it's kind of just a standard profile for an AR-15. But again, for a pistol, this would be a very, very heavy barrel. At 25 yards for zeroing, I was able to get 3 rounds touching each other at 25 yards using just this Vector 1X prism, which is actually an excellent optic. At 100 yards, I could probably squeeze out a 3 to 6 inch group, which again, we're talking about short barreled 9mm, which 9mm is not a particularly accurate ammo to begin with. But again, the accuracy that I was able to get out of this just for my own purposes with very cheap ammunition was what I would consider to be excellent. So at the end of the day, reliability with stock lock mags was perfect. Shooting performance was great. It was very fun. The ammunition is cheap to shoot. It's fairly plentiful to find right now. Again, reliability 100%, accuracy very good. Cost $350 for the upper receiver and the adapter, so fairly inexpensive if you're converting a AR-15 lower that you already have laying around. In this case, I went out and bought an Arrow EP9, so that added the cost. But even with that, the buffer tube, brace, Midwest Industries adapter, you're probably looking at about $600 to $700, which for a complete package isn't too terribly bad. And remember that we are getting a side folding package that goes very, very short with, again, the bufferless recoil system. So that for, again, about $700. The only other thing, literally, I think the only other thing that could compete with it is a Strybog, and Strybogs, from what I've seen, have been less reliable overall, though again, I don't have that much ammo on this, only about 200 rounds at this point. And again, the Strybogs are going to have some different feature sets. Some of them can take Glock mags, so this is an interesting concept, and it certainly is very inexpensive if you're already converting an AR-15 lower that you have laying around or an AR-9 lower that you have laying around. Overall, though, for me personally, I do think that this is a very cool option. What it's going to come down to is whether or not you love or hate 9mm PCCs and whether or not you want something that can fold and shoot at the same time. So if you're looking for an AR-9 that can fold and shoot at the same time, takes your standard Glock mags and can work with AR-15 lower receivers, has AR-15 controls, AR-15 triggers, hand guards, all that sort of fun options. Anything you want to mount on it, you totally can. It's a pretty great way to go. From what I've seen so far, subject to change if I get more ammunition on it, which I probably will be doing more testing on it in the future, and we'll see how reliability holds up. So, with all of that out of the way, guys, let me know what you guys think of Bear Creek Arsenal's bufferless 9mm setup and this current setup that it's in right now. And with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.